One of my favorite books was called Walk Across America by Peter Jenkins. He left New York with his dog, and eventually he ended up in Louisiana and became a Christian. But along the way, he stopped with a mountain man named Homer in West Virginia. Homer didn't want him to leave. So Homer said to Peter, he said, "No matter how far away you get from these mountains, they'll always be in your soul. So you found what you've been looking for." On March 23rd, 1971, Dr. Kennedy wrote a letter to the Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church congregation. It said this: "Some weeks ago, the session decided that the time had come for a new school organization, one which would better serve our congregation. It's expected to be so outstanding that it may become a model for other schools to emulate." Then he said this: "Classrooms will be large, heated, air-conditioned, and carpeted." And then he said, "We expect Westminster Academy to be distinguished by loyalty to Christ and the highest academic standards." Almost exactly 50 years later to the day, the Westminster Academy Alumni Association received a letter from a graduating senior, the class of 2021. She wrote this: "I begged my mother not to send me to Westminster Academy, but I wish I could go back to my 14-year-old self and tell her it was going to be okay. I would tell her she would end up cherishing Westminster way more than she ever intended, and that her relationship with God would be non-existent without this school. Westminster is a place that cares. I am beyond grateful and blessed to have the foundation and skills I've been provided with, and will forever cherish this school close to my heart." You see, Angelina found what she was looking for. The school got into her soul. How does it happen? Westminster first opened in the fall of 1971. They had no facilities, so they opened up at a racetrack with 320 students and 22 teachers. Some of those teachers are here with us this evening: Ed Hopkins, Gene McCants, Carol Neal, and Bob and Betty Edwards' daughter is here. In my research, I had read one of the reasons they had to leave the racetrack early were horseflies. So in 1972, they upgraded from a racetrack to a motel. And at the motel, they hired Margie Metzger and Carolyn Saunders, who are both here tonight, along with Ginger Loomis. And Ginger and Carolyn put on some amazing children's musicals. We had our first student council. The president, Bruce Bromley, is here. Our first graduating class of 8 students that year, of which 5 are here tonight. In 1973, East Campus was finally constructed, and they hired Ken Key, Marion Lipp, and Carolyn Steenhook, who are also here. And apparently in that year, both the headmaster and the principal quit. So the school board hired a Bible teacher whose plan was to become a pastor, and Ken Wackus stayed for 31 years. One of the things that Ken developed as headmaster is something called the Headmaster's Annual Report. It's sort of like the State of the Union. And one year, they tried to encourage us teachers to submit things into the Headmaster's Annual Report. And they said, our teachers are doing amazing things, like Susan Carey took her Bible classes to a ball game, and they shared tracts and shared the gospel. And I thought, I haven't done any of those things. So I made up a bunch of stuff and sent it in to my department head, Rob Joint. For example, I told him I took my Bible classes to Rome, where we helped the Pope hold up his arms while he blessed the pets. We went to New York and rang the opening bell at the stock market and attended a conference on global warming. About a week later, I got a call from the administration, and they said, "We just want to confirm all these stories." And I thought, oh man, it could have been a joke that went terribly wrong. And I thought, whoa, I got out of trouble. A year and a half later, in my mailbox, in the next headmaster's report, there was the story. And I thought, I am so fired. One of my students from previous years, Kevin McKinnon, said, "I was in your business class and I didn't get to go to New York and ring the bell." In 1974, Gary Steenhoek was hired. He's here. And that year, they started something called the Lions Pride Drill Team, of which the charter member was Jamie Schwietert-Hebda. She returned in 1986 and is still here teaching in her 37th year. In 1975, they hired a girls cross-country coach, Kathy Key. 1976, they hired Tom Fagley and Rob Joint. I believe one of the reasons they hired Rob Joint is he does the best impression of Dr. Kennedy anybody's ever heard. As a matter, the last many years, I do something called Senior Chapel, where we review all of the stories for this graduating senior class. And a girl came to me and said, "Mr. Jominy, I've been going to this school my entire life, and I've always wanted to shake Dr. Kennedy's hand." And I thought, I could make that happen at the Senior Chapel. So I went to Dr. Kennedy's secretary, and I explained the situation to her. I said, "Would Dr. Kennedy come to chapel?" She said, "Oh, no, no, no. He would never do anything like that." I said, "Well, would you ask him?" She said, "Well, okay." So I went back again after another week. "Nope, no, he will not do that." And I thought, well, that's okay, because I'll just bring out Rob Joint, who does a great impression of Dr. Kennedy. So, at the time of the Senior Chapel, I said, "Dr. Kennedy, would you come out here?" And the real Dr. Kennedy came out. The students went crazy. No one was more surprised than me. I asked Rob Joint afterwards, "What happened?" He said, "Well, I was standing in the back with Dr. Kennedy's robe on, and he said, and the real Dr. Kennedy came up and said, 'What are you doing?' And Rob said, 'Well, I'm going to go out and imitate you.' And Dr. Kennedy said to him, 'Well, I enjoy levity from time to time.'" And he came out there. In 1978, Tom DeRosa was hired and started the Creation Studies Institute. And that very same year, Westminster hired a football player from Bowling Green State University that was Jeff Smith. He is still at the school as a beloved Bible teacher in his 43rd year. And that same year, Ken Wackus flew to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and interviewed a graduating Calvin College senior by the name of Bruce Buitt. Bruce told his then fiancée that, "I'm going to bring my new boss to the clothing store where you work." So when Bruce and Ken came into the clothing store, Fran didn't see Ken's head over the clothing racks, and she said, "I thought you were bringing your new boss." Bruce said he got married on Wednesday. He graduated on Wednesday, got married on Thursday, and on Sunday he drove down to Fort Lauderdale. He said he had no idea where it was. He said it's now been 43 years, and he still has not taken a honeymoon. In 1979, Dick Briggs came, and he provided some amazing musicals. Those musicals were so good, people fought to get the seats. Have you ever seen a God-fearing crowd go after Westminster Academy musical seats? Perhaps you're familiar with the Bye Bye Birdie police tape incident. Or one year when Dick was doing The Sound of Music. My son, who had no musical ability, no dancing ability, decided to go out for the play, and Dick made him a Nazi. And Dick asked my sister, "Would you film the play?" And we set up in the front, we're filming the play, And a lady came by and said, "You can't be here." I said, "Why?" She said, "My daughter's Maria the lead, and I'm saving all these seats." And I said, "My son's a Nazi, and I'm not moving." In 1980, Jeff Carroll, Leslie Briggs, and Dot McQueen were hired. In 1981, Nancy Kilpatrick and Carol Moore. In 1983, we had our very first graduates accepted at MIT and Cornell. 1986, a math teacher from Boca Raton Christian, John Baker, came, and he stayed for 36 years. In 1987, Eric Matthews was hired to teach history. He said, "God clearly reached down into Connecticut and pulled me down to Fort Lauderdale." Do you know that Eric has 5 grandchildren at Westminster right now, looking forward to having Grandpa as their teacher? That very same year, my wife and I brought a very reluctant softball player to school. Every day I picked her up after school and she said, "I hate it here, I hate it here." Then she said, "I love it here." Westminster got into her soul. And eventually her brother came and 5 of her cousins came, 3 of them all married fellow graduates. Do you know in the class of 94, 14 of them all married each other? We have 50 alumni couples. I tell my current students, when I teach them about marriage and family, the person you marry might be sitting right next to you. In 1991, my wife Jenny came here to teach kindergarten. 1992, Tracy Zai Wood was hired, and today she is the lower school principal in her 30th year. How does this place get into your soul? My very first day teaching in 1995, first week, I was coming out of Publix with some groceries, and I was stopped by a van. 4 girls got out, jumped out, and hugged me. "Hi, Mr. Jominy," got back in the van and took off. It was a drive-by hugging. And I also noticed how much the students cared about grades. We had a teacher here named Tom Crenshaw that he said, "If any of you can give me a hot sauce that I can't eat, I'll give you extra credit." Cody Stapleton, one of his students, gave him some hot sauce, and Tom passed out and they took him to the hospital. Afterwards, I asked Cody, "What kind of sauce was that?" Cody said, "I don't know. It was some kind of powder and some liquid some kid gave me." I said, "Didn't you think it was dangerous?" He said, "I needed the extra credit." In 1996, the school bought 10 acres in West Campus and developed some world-class athletic facilities. To date, our teams have won 27 state titles. We have athletes that played in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the X Games, March Madness, the World Series, and the Olympics. In the fine arts, we have Dove-nominated singers, movie and TV actors, network news anchors, and church worship leaders. As alumni, we have doctors, lawyers, business leaders, a superintendent of a major public school district, and 7 senior pastors in this area alone. In 1994, Westminster hired author Dr. Laura Groves, and she gave some outstanding madrigal dinners. In 1996, engineer Kent Stoley was hired, and he started a world-class robotics team called Shark Attack. That makes 8 current teachers and administrators who have been here for 25 years and more. Kent Stoley's first year, he decided to take his science students to go to Cape Canaveral to the Space Center. And they said, "Mr. Jominy, because you teach 9th graders, you got to go along." And I thought, that's the last thing I want to do. And we stopped at a convenience store on the way up, and all the kids were taking a long time. And I went in to see what they were doing. They were all buying Doritos and Twinkies, and they were all buying a brand new product that had been invented called the laser pen. We took a tour of the Space Center. It was all over. They took us into the IMAX theater. When the lights went out, hundreds of laser pens came out, and they kicked us out. When we went out to the bus driver said, I got some bad news. He said, one of the school buses, the air conditioning broke. So Mike Proco, who was along, said, I got a good idea. Let's have the girls ride in the bus with the air, and the boys ride in the back in the bus without the air. And I thought, that's a dumb idea, because I knew which bus I'd be on. So we were riding back to school, going down the freeway, and it was Africa hot. And we're going down on the freeway, and the guys all start to take down the windows. The bus driver said, you can't do that. It's against the law to drive on a freeway with the windows down in a school bus. So they had to put the windows up. And did I tell you it was hot? Next thing you know, I look around. I'm not making this up. They were all in their underwear. And I thought, what if we got in an accident? And the highway patrol came out and saw all these bodies lying all over the road. They'd say, you know, it must be some kind of cult, because every one of them are in their underwear and they all have a laser pen. 3 years later, when those students were in seniors, and I was telling the story in senior chapel, after it was all over, Mike Proco and I were cleaning up the sanctuary. You know, Mike could just walk into God's presence. And after it was all over, 1 hour later, I got a call, said Mike had been killed by a car on the way home. And just like that, Mike saw God. Can you imagine the blessings of being in a place like Westminster that gets into your soul through God's sovereign care? Laura Grove's son, Andrew, a WA lifer, is a math teacher at Lexington Christian, where current headmaster Joel Satterley began his career as a principal. Laura said she got a call on the first Friday of January in 2012. It was her husband, and he said, "Hon, Andrew's been in a head-on collision. They had to cut him out of the car, and they airlifted him to UK hospital." She drove immediately to the airport, and she got a phone call on her way to the airport from a WA parent that said, "My husband is TSA. He'll help you get through the checkpoints." She got another call just before she got on the plane, and another WA parent said, "Mrs. Groves, my husband is an orthopedic surgeon. He will call Kentucky and talk to Andrew's doctor and answer any questions you might have." Laura said after Andrew's first surgery, Andrew's room was filled with cards and cookies and all kinds of things, a huge envelope from Holly Wettrick's students. Then she said 2 days later, she got a phone call in Andrew's room. And somebody said, "Mrs. Groves, you don't know me, but my name is Rick Pounds. My daughter was in your English class." He said, "We live in Lexington, and could I do anything to help you?" And he allowed Laura and her husband to stay at their home and let him use his car. 2 surgeries later, Laura brought Andrew home to Fort Lauderdale. He had to stay 3 months in a wheelchair. At Holy Cross Hospital, Andrew said, a woman came up to him and said, "You don't know me, but my son is a middle school student at Westminster, and I'm here to help you get home." His care was taken over by V. Hermita, an orthopedic surgeon with Westminster Children. Once that therapy was completed, Andrew learned to walk with a cane and a brace. Back in Lexington, Andrew went back. The Pounds family owned a physical therapy facility where they eventually learned to help him, and Laura said that they loved him and got him to walk without either a brace or a cane. Laura said, "We found treasures in the darkness. God provided WA families we didn't even know that became crucial in our son's recovery. God's people became his hands and his feet for us." And through all the years, there are many other teachers and staff making memories and getting into souls. We've been looking at the rearview mirror for a while, and I'm excited for what God has planned for the future. Bernie Gonzalez is coming up next to sing "The Best Is Yet to Come." But note this, It was a racetrack, a motel, an East Campus, and a West Campus. Those were the seeds. You are the harvest. Thank you.